We shall see if this video gets taken down or not, but I would like to respond to the multiple people in my comments, both on TikTok and on YouTube, who take issue when I draw a comparison between the CECOT prison in El Salvador and the early days of Auschwitz. Now, let's all remember that Auschwitz-Birkenau was in Poland, not in Germany. Auschwitz was originally constructed as a concentration/labor camp. The justification for its building was the claim that other prisons were above capacity, overflowing with prisoners. I just want to reference here an article from ABC News from a week ago. As Trump and Bukele entered the Oval Office, before reporters were allowed in the room, Trump discussed his proposal to send what he called American criminals accused of violent crimes to El Salvador and told Bukele that he needed to build more prisons to house them. Homegrown criminals are next, Trump said, according to a live stream posted by Bukele's office. I said homegrowns are next. The homegrowns, you got to build about 5 more places. Bukele was heard responding, all right, and others in the room laughed. It's not big enough, Trump said. Trump and various White House officials have repeatedly floated the idea of sending U.S. citizens to El Salvador and other places, something legal experts have said would be flatly unconstitutional. The location and the conditions of prisons like CECOT would violate the 8th Amendment many times over. It would be the very definition of cruel and unusual punishment. If it's a homegrown criminal, I have no problem, 34-time convicted felon Trump said. Now we're studying the laws right now. Pam Bondi is studying. If we can do that, that's good. You can't do that. That's flatly unconstitutional. Much like Auschwitz, Germany's justification for having camps that existed outside of Germany was so that they could disappear folks into those places and then claim, we don't have jurisdiction. That is precisely what Trump is doing with CECOT. Kidnapping people in the middle of the night, renditioning them across the border, violating their due process rights. These folks have not been charged with any crimes, and they have not had the ability to defend themselves in court. Their due process rights have been violated. And yes, as I laid out a couple of days ago, the Constitution extends, and the Supreme Court has affirmed the due process rights to any person inside the United States. Not citizen, person. It makes the distinction person, not citizen, within the United States, which is why they want to yeet you to another country so that they can say, well, you don't have due process down there, nothing we can do about it. It's important to note that El Salvadoran government officials brag that the only way to leave CECOT is in a coffin. Oh, but Angela, you're being hyperbolic comparing CECOT to a concentration camp in Nazi Germany. Who does it help to be hyperbolic like that? But you see, I've picked that comparison very carefully because what Auschwitz was by 1944 is not what it started out as in 1940. And what it looked like in 1940 is very much what CECOT looks like today. I would like to reference an article called Inside CECOT, the Prison That Nobody Leaves. If you're watching this on YouTube, I will obviously have the link in the video description. So in this article, a group of journalists are given a tour inside CECOT where El Salvadoran officials are bragging that nobody can escape. And they're bragging about the brutal conditions under which the prisoners are kept. Multiple international oversight organizations have claimed that the prison violates the minimum prison standards known as the Nelson Mandela rules. Each cell in CECOT has room for 80 inmates, and they sleep on metal bunks with no mattresses. But through the tour, the warden failed to provide the exact number of inmates in each cell. Where there's room for 10, there's room for 20, and room for 100. The lights are kept on 24 hours a day. That in and of itself is a form of psychological torture. There are no windows inside the prison, no curtains, inmates don't have blankets, and the lights are kept on for 24 hours a day. Family visitation is not allowed. In fact, no visitation at all is allowed for the inmates. They're not even allowed to receive mail from their family. The inmates are locked up for 23 hours, 30 minutes a day. They are allowed 30 minutes for a walk through the main hall. Again, not outdoors, no windows. And during their walk, they wear handcuffs and their feet are shackled. The only activity they are allowed to do inside their cells is read the Bible, and that privilege is only extended to some of the population. I can't put up side-by-side comparison pics of Auschwitz and CECOT without this video getting taken down immediately. What I did share is already a stretch, so I encourage you to take some time. I know it's hard, but we have to bear witness to what is happening. Take some time and Google photos of what Auschwitz looked like and what the conditions were of the people who were forced to live and die within its confines. And then Google CECOT and look at what the conditions are for prisoners there. And I would just like to remind you that none of the men who have been renditioned there from the United States have faced due process. More than 75% of them have no criminal record at all. They have not been charged with any crimes in the United States. And as of late today, there are reports that Bukele has told Venezuela that he would release all of the Venezuelans if Venezuela would do him a favor and, return some El Salvadorans. So the claim that Bukele could not release these folks was obviously false. When it is politically expedient for him, he absolutely can let these innocent men go. I get that we don't want to see what is happening. It's unbearable to think that this is what the United States is doing. I've seen so many folks in my comments who are trying to minimize it, saying, well, these are gang members, and so it doesn't matter what happens to them. None of these men have been convicted of a crime. They've never even gotten a day in court in the US. And we already know that the Trump regime has been flat out lying about Kilmar Abrego Garcia, putting up photoshopped images that make it look like he has tattoos that he doesn't actually have, claiming that wearing a Chicago Bulls hat must make him a member of a gang. Like, embarrassingly weird claims. Also, they released his entire criminal record today, and it says he has no criminal history. And I want to say here too, there's so much attention on what is happening to Kilmar, and he is sort of become the poster child for these illegal renditions and the effort to release these men from this torture gulag, from America's Auschwitz. But we cannot forget about the nearly 300 other men who also have not been charged with any crimes, who were snatched away from their homes and their families. They were working in the United States, paying taxes in the United States, paying rent on their homes. They were living here peacefully. But Donald Trump wants to eventually disappear American citizens that disagree with what his regime is doing, political dissidents. And so, of course, he's going to start with the so they came force, right? He's going to start with the people that you are less sympathetic toward, brown folks, brown men who are immigrants. And he's going to label them as thugs and gang members to further dehumanize them and make you sort of like, maybe they don't get constitutional rights, to ease you into the idea. And then he's going to step it up. He's already said he's going to step it up to U.S. citizens who are convicted of crimes and are in prison. And from there, you think he's not going to go to U.S. citizens that are not convicted of crimes, but just criticize him and his regime? Because that's exactly what he's going to do. That's what happened in Germany. If there is no due process, anybody can be renditioned. How do you prove that you're innocent if you can't have your day in court? Without due process, how do you refute any of the accusations that the regime could make against you? They could smear you in the press as a violent criminal. They could say you're a gang member. They could say anything they want. And if they kidnap you out of your home in the middle of the night and ship you off to a concentration camp in another country and say, we can't get them back. Whoopsie, the only people who leave there leave in a coffin. What are you going to do about it? Our constitutional rights, the right to due process, that is what protects us from the state doing whatever the fuck they want to us. So I know you may not be very sympathetic toward folks who are immigrants from Central and South America. You may not be sympathetic toward brown folks at all. And that sympathy may be further eroded by claims that these men might be in gangs. And if you cannot summon up the empathy for them after having seen what you've seen, then be a little bit selfish and understand that if they do it to those men, their ultimate goal is to do it to you, to your children, to your neighbors. We can learn from the lessons of history here. Men like Donald Trump don't stop. They only escalate. He will not be content with putting 300 innocent men from Venezuela and El Salvador in a torture prison, attempting to disappear them there, ripping them away from their families, hoping that they will die down there. He has already expressly stated he intends to escalate and wants to do the same thing to American citizens. So please understand when I make the comparison and I say that CECOT in 2025 is the Auschwitz of the United States. I want you to compare it to the Auschwitz of 1940, and then I want you to look at the trajectory of that camp and then think about how likely it is that CECOT will be following the same trajectory based on the words and actions of this regime thus far. And also think about your humanity and who you are as a person, whether you want to be spending your tax dollars doing this to men who have been convicted of no crimes, men who are fathers and husbands, men who, under the United States Constitution, are not only innocent until proven guilty, they've not been charged with any crimes. Understand, anybody in the United States, whether or not you have been charged with a crime, if this is allowed to stand, this regime can do to you what it has done to those men.